afternoon. Thank you very much, Nakia. This afternoon, our first session shall be presented by the Bahamas Association of Compliance Officers, and the topic shall be Emerging AML Compliance Risks and Challenges. I shall begin by introducing our esteemed presenters for this session, and shall invite them to join me on the stage, please. Ms. Maria Dorsett is the Chief Compliance Officer and Money Laundering Reporting Officer at EFG Bank and Trust, Bahamas Limited. A financial services professional with over 18 years' experience, Maria is a Fellow of the International Compliance Association, the Association of Financial Crime Specialists, and a certified money laundering professional, anti-money laundering professional. She has served on the Executive Committee of BACO for the past 10 years, and as president of BACO from 2020 to 2022. Maria holds an accounting and finance degree and is fluent in Spanish. Please join me in welcoming Mrs. Maria Dorsett. Mrs. Fareda Sands is a thought leader in compliance, risk, and anti-money laundering space in the Caribbean. A seasoned financial services professional with over 25 years in industry, she heads Initium Novum Enterprise Limited, a firm providing advisory services in financial services regulations. Fareda is a Fellow of the International Compliance Association and holds the CAMS designation, along with a cadre of other certifications in anti-money laundering, compliance, risk, and financial crime. A chartered banker, Fareda holds a Chartered Banker Masters of Business Administration and a Masters of Science in Financial Crime and Compliance in Digital Society with distinction, the latter from the University of Manchester. Fareda is a past president and current member of the Self-Regulatory Organization and Steering Committee of BACO. She serves as a director of the Steering Committee and a Steering Committee member of the Caribbean Regional Compliance Association, and is a former director and secretary of the Bahamas Financial Services Board. Please join me in welcoming Mrs. Fareda Sands.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Madam Moderator, for that kind introduction. As Fareda and I present on this very timely topic this afternoon, I think it was suitable for us to present first, looking at the agenda that is being presented this afternoon. As many of the items that we have in our presentation, you will hear more about in the other sessions later this afternoon that will kind of bring everything all together. We wanted to start off by, make sure this works. Okay. We want to start off our presentation by giving an overview of the AML compliance function. And the purpose of going over these points is to ensure that as compliance professionals, we understand the full ambit of our roles within our financial institutions. We should understand all of the risks that we should be preventing and mitigating in our institutions. A lot of people think that KYC and transaction monitoring is it, while KYC and transaction monitoring is the fundamentals to mitigating AML compliance risk. We should ensure that we're understanding the exposure to AML compliance in our organization. It is not a one-size-fits-all approach, and you should understand what are the particular risks in your own organization. AML risk, know your customer risk, know your transaction, anti-bribery, corruption, sanctions, the financing of terrorism, proliferation financing, and tax compliance all come under the scope of the AML compliance function. You should ensure adequate governance of the compliance function, independent compliance officers that are senior members of the organization with the right talent and expertise, the responsibilities of your compliance officers, what the objectives of the compliance function is, and the overall organization of the compliance unit within the organization. Principles for the effective management of AML compliance risk should also be clearly outlined and documented, and they should cover customer due diligence, ongoing monitoring, STR reporting, employee training, and all of these documented in your policies, procedures, in your methods and tools used to combat AML compliance risk. And to understand and know that the core objective of everything that we do in our daily work is to identify risk, measure risk, monitor risk, and report and escalate. So we now move on to emerging risk and challenges in the AML compliance area. There are many that are not listed here, but we thought it would be best to touch on the ones that are definitely top of mind in our environment today. Right. So as the financial landscape continues to evolve, so do the threats related to money laundering and financial crime. We need to understand and ensure that we're staying ahead of all of the emerging AML risks and threats, and this is crucial for professionals working in financial crime, compliance prevention, and money laundering prevention. Sanctions compliance as an emerging AML risk and top compliance challenge right now. One second. Since the Russia-Ukraine crisis and Russia's full invasion of Ukraine, international sanctions regime have grown in volume and complexity. 2 years in, and it's becoming increasingly clear that we should expect further expansion of sanctions regimes. Regulators are now shifting their focus to the implementation of existing sanctions regimes and harder enforcement of sanctions regulations and rules, pushing companies to boost their sanctions compliance defenses. This is a formidable task for many businesses who need to approach sanctions risk on many levels, from technical expertise on the movement of certain goods and transactions, to complicated due diligence of control and ownership structures, to grasping fluid, divisive geopolitics that drive change, to sanctions regimes. Cross-border compliance is another top of mind and another top challenge for compliance officers today. A robust cross-border framework is essential for financial institutions seeking to boost efficiency and reduce risk. Companies in the financial services industry with international operations must ensure compliance not only with local legislation and requirements, but with legislation in every jurisdiction in which they are operating. Many financial institutions still rely on time-consuming and error-prone manual process, and so well-managed cross-border activities protects your institution's reputation, but also enhances client and employee experience. Many compliance officers may not be aware of legislation and requirements in jurisdictions in which they operate, and hence are not ensuring compliance with those international cross-border regulations. As an example, do you know that you need to be licensed by certain Canadian authorities to provide security services to Canadian clients? Things like that. So we need to make sure that we understand all of the cross-border regulations that we should be in compliance with. Regulatory change. Aligning your organization to the regulatory environment in which we operate, including industry, countries, and regulatory agencies, monitoring regulatory developments across applicable issuing bodies, and adapting your policies, standards, and control. Why is regulatory change a top challenge or top of mind for compliance professionals? There are critical challenges that are faced due to regulatory changes, one being cost, the cost of appropriate compliance program to ensure that you're monitoring and tracking regulatory change could be costly. The process of complying with regulations can be time-consuming and resource-intensive. Regulatory changes can sometimes take a long time to process and implement, especially if still done manually. Complexities. Regulations can be complex and voluminous, making it challenging to review, create, understand, and comply with them. Flexibility. Organizations need to maintain flexibility to adapt to ever-changing regulations. They must be able to adapt their business practices to comply with new regulations as necessary, sometimes causing issues with strategic and operations planning for the business. And risk. There is always a risk that non-compliance with regulations could lead to audit failures, reputational damage, investigations, penalties, and other legal actions. And misalignment with regulatory updates can have a ripple effect on other areas of the organization. FRAML. If you don't know what FRAML is, fraud and anti-money laundering. This term is a new hot one in the list of compliance hot topics. And FRAML is the combination of fraud prevention and anti-money laundering, and it represents a holistic approach that prevents an effective way for organizations to strengthen their defense against money laundering. As fraud gains in volumes and velocity, so too will the need for fraudsters to launder their profits. And as cross-border financial crimes are here to stay, no institution or location is immune. With the complexity and scale of these threats on the rise, any small chink in the armor can become a massive issue. And last but not least of the emerging risk or the top challenges for compliance that we chose is compliance process inefficiencies. Reliance on manual processes. When compliance work is based on manual process, as it has been in the past, it becomes a hindrance instead of a strategic advantage. Manual processes result in labor-intensive processes, inefficiencies, duplicative processes, data inconsistencies, human error, and ultimately data breaches and non-compliance. Another compliance process inefficiency, recurring compliance failures. You can identify that your processes are inefficient if you're having recurring compliance failures, recurring audit points that you may have remediated in the past, but here they are again. Recurring regulatory issues or regulatory observations, because there's a difficulty in adapting to the ever-changing regulatory landscape. Another compliance process inefficiency, siloed and disorganized compliance efforts. With siloed approaches, teams spend unnecessary time searching, requesting, retrieving data from various sources, which in turn leads to inefficiencies, data duplication, data safety issues, longer processing times, and lower quality compliance. When teams lack a centralized and instantly accessible repository for information, compliance management becomes a struggle, with teams having to reconcile data among multiple databases, sending information back and forth for updates, approvals, etc. In scenarios like these, the whole compliance effort becomes inefficient and prone to vulnerabilities, calling for frequent manual troubleshooting and requiring systemic overhaul. How do we mitigate these and other emerging risks? Adequate risk assessments. We should ensure that the risk assessments are adequate and are done in accordance with the nature and complexity of your business, and that you're identifying the proper risk and ensuring that the controls are effective and adequate for those risks that have been identified. Understanding what the risk appetite of the organization is. Internal controls and appropriate risk mitigation. So your remediation and mitigation plans are tactical measures that can be carried out to ensure mitigation and prevention of these risks. Controls should be effective, and these controls should be tested for their effectiveness. Controls like customer due diligence. You should have comprehensive tools and screening mechanisms, and your transaction monitoring should be robust. Regulatory compliance, staying informed about the latest regulatory update requirements and guidance, again, not only locally, but globally. Collaboration and innovation, sharing of best practices and information across the AML and anti-financial crime industry, including understanding what innovation can do for you and your organization, and determine how to get there in the most practical ways. And ongoing training in AML and compliance topics. Training will always be one of the fundamental ways to ensure that you stay on top of risks. We need to have a strong foundation as compliance professionals of knowledge and skills, as training plays a vital role in equipping you with the necessary expertise to identify and address these evolving threats. We will now move on to a case study where we invite you all to participate. We expect that this is an interactive session, and we invite you to analyze and assess this case with us. Turn it over to Fareda.
Good afternoon, everyone. You all been in here just as long as me. So good afternoon, everyone. Let's get the energy up in the room. Let's get the energy up in the room. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Y'all hungry, eh? What happened? What happened? Please get these people some coffee. Okay, so thank you so much, Raquel, for the introduction. Thank you, Maria, for laying a foundation for me to work with. Okay, I think I'm going the wrong way. Okay, so I teach AML and compliance, right? So think of you all as my students today. No? Yeah? And normally I have them at 6 p.m., so they just like y'all. They tired, they didn't been to work all day, they ain't trying to hear me. But this is a master class, is it not? Is that not what you told me, Nakia? This is a master class, right? So in a master class, we expect what? Participation? Well, what happened? What? I don't feel anything. Master class? Yes. That's what I'm talking about. So let me see the hands of compliance professionals in the room.
We don't have many.
So only 5 of y'all, that's what you're trying to say. So ain't nobody on this side in compliance? Director, I know you know about compliance, even though your hand ain't up. Nobody else? Let me see them high. Hold them high. I want to know who I got ask my questions to, y'all. Come on, right with me. I see you, Sam. Thanks. I see you, Ayante. Thank you. So we're going to work through this. And by working through this, we are going to further cement some of the emerging AML threats. Cool? Cool? All right, let's go. Mistress Evelyn P. presents herself to XYZ Bank Limited in the Bahamas to open an account for personal investments and savings. She wants to open the account in the name of her personal investment company. We call that a PIC. Also incorporated in the Bahamas. Or an IBC. Some people know it as IBC. This is Maria, adding to this for me. Thanks, Maria. She resides in St. Martin with her husband and 2 adult children. I know I mean Maria picks St. Martin, but we pick St. Martin, right? You all can figure out why we pick St. Martin at the end of this. I hope someone figures out why we pick St. Martin. That ain't just there for just being their sake. All right, that's just first hint. She does not work and has been a homemaker all of her life. The source of funds for the account opening is from her husband's successful career in the import-export business. His company, ImpX Limited, is engaged in the import, export, and trade of oil and gas products in Venezuela. I hear it. His company was established 12 years ago with his longtime friend and business partner, who is the Minister of Energy in St. Martin. Just recently, his partner sold his ownership in the company for $25 million. That's some good change. Leaving Mr. P as the sole owner of the company. Mr. P has decided to gift his wife $20 million. Where he is? Where them kind of fellas is? Where he is? Don't tell my husband I said that, y'all. To fund her own private investment account that would later benefit her and their children. All right, so let's go. What are the risks posed by opening this account at the bank?
Who's taking the first question?
Hands up, first question. Come on, let's go. You all ain't I can tell your answers though. This is a master class. Sam, I see you taking pictures. I hope you answering me over there. What are the risks posed? Let's go. I hear y'all was, which means y'all know what I was going to ask. Nobody?
Let me ask it in another way. Am I on?
Pardon? Thanks.
Anything else?
Come on. Stand up so they can hear you. Tell us why. Okay. She right. What else? There's plenty of risks involved in this, y'all. So that's only one. Right. So one of our speakers, Miss Erin, is saying a PEP because the husband's business partner is the Minister of Energy, right? Which means he's a close associate. Yes? We all get that? What else? Someone's hand was up here at this table in the front. No? Nobody? Ayante, tell us. You should know I was going to call your name. You want to stand for us? So they, I'm sorry, so they can hear? Right, she said high-risk business, Venezuela, oil and gas, import, export. Y'all seeing all of those things inside there? What else? Hey, say it again, say it again.
Corruption.
Why?
Because of St. Martin, their premier was locked up for...
Oh, Lord, don't go down that road. Say the next reason why. What else? It's corruption, but don't say that part. Don't say that part. Pardon?
The corruption index, that's what I was thinking about.
Okay, thank you. Someone said something else. Weak AML control. She calling a name up here, but I ain't saying that name. Say it again. Petrobras scandal, Venezuela. Oil and gas, same industry? Yes? For those who don't know, Petrobras is a Venezuelan oil and gas company. It's owned primarily by the government of Venezuela. They've had scandals. You can check the internet to see what's been going on with that. Okay. And a lot of the activities are sanctioned. Okay? So we've identified and considered some of the risks. What are some of the considerations that should be given once the risks have been identified? Now, we'd already identified some of the risks. We had like 4 or 5. What are some of the considerations you would need to give if you're a compliance person, yes, trying to onboard this client? Let's go, Erin. Okay. She said enhanced KYC. Tell us why. Enhanced due diligence, right? She named them all. PEP status, the corruption index, the due diligence. You need to ensure that you have all of the information that you need and then some that you think your regulators need, yes? And then some that you think your internal auditors are going to need, yes? And then some that if you're the MLR are going to need to make sure you stay out of jail if something goes awry with this account, yes? There are lots of things to consider. Any other considerations? Let's see what the business side gonna say. Who in here on the business side? Because, you know, we always have, you know, some...
Exactly.
Right, the risk appetite for the business. You have to consider if the business is willing to accept this high-risk client, yes? The true source of wealth. She said the true source of wealth. You have to consider that. Not because we said that the 20 million is coming from the husband, how we know he ain't commingled that before he give that to her, right? Because let's be honest, if it's 25 million and the husband get a wife 20 million, I start thinking, why? No? Y'all don't think like that, eh? It's only me? Compliance officers, y'all back me up. Y'all don't think like that? Nobody gives away, right? Think about it. Nobody gives away 20 out of $25 million. Okay? All right. Nakia say don't get in their business because you already know they do it. Okay, I agree. But in reality, as a compliance professional, that is a significant consideration, right? Why are you giving her $20 million? Someone else over here was saying something. What else would you consider?
Whether there's negative news or adverse media.
Ain't nobody's checked like the negative news, the adverse media. Nobody checking to see if that partner
Clean or dirty.
had any stories before he left the company. You have to think about that, right? You have to do your searches. When you're onboarding, don't you do your searches? You have to ensure that even though there's a story presented to you, the story is actually true. Now, you won't always know if the story is true, but you can do your enhanced due diligence searches. That is not only running the names. That is not only checking to see if they're PEP or sanctioned. You checking to see if these people had any fraud scandals in the past, money laundering scandals in the past, anything negative that perhaps could be linked back, yes, to any sort of situations with the company over the years, regardless of if it happened in Venezuela or outside of Venezuela. Because if you're dealing with a PEP, yes, their arms are very long, usually, right? They don't only have friends in their home countries. It's clear, right? They have friends, because if you're a minister, and we're talking about the Caribbean here, you know how we go, we know everybody in the Caribbean, we have other relationships. So we have to consider all of these things as well. Yes? We agree? Yes? Good. So, if we decide, after knowing all of what we just talked about, that we still want to onboard this client, what is the process required to do so? How y'all is on board PEPs? Let me just ask y'all like that then. For those of you who on board PEPs, how y'all is on board PEPs? Nobody, y'all ain't answering it.
Yeah.
You have to have senior management or board level approval. You can't be on board in a PEP at your level. I don't care how high your level is as head of compliance. That above your pay grade. Yes, for y'all who don't know, PEPs have to be onboarded by senior management and or the board. Yes? What else do you think about if you're onboarding this client? You know, business people in here, y'all don't think about fees. Y'all got to think about the revenue.
Risk got to be.
It has to make sense, right? The risk got to be worth the reward. You can't be onboarding this type of client and your revenue is like $10,000 a year. You can't even get a retainer for an attorney for $10,000 a year if something goes wrong with this account. Yes? So you have to consider all of these things when you are onboarding such a high-risk client. So I hope that just this simple case study got you guys thinking about some of the emerging AML threats. We covered sanctions, we covered bribery, we covered enhanced due diligence. A lot of the things that are coming to light now, we covered in the last 10, 15 minutes, right? So go back to your offices and put these things into practice. You know, remember, hey, I need to consider this. Once I identify the risk, what do I do next? Step by step to ensure that you cover yourself as a compliance professional and to ensure that you, if you're the money laundering reporting officer, don't end up on the wrong side of the law. You have statutory requirements, and breaching them is no fun. So thank you very much. From the Bahamas Association of Compliance Officers, we appreciate AIBT's invitation to just start this masterclass off with you this afternoon, and we hope to see all of you again sometime in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fareda and Maria, for that highly interactive and very informative session. I know that we are a bit of constrained for times. Do we have a moment for questions or? Yes, okay. So we will open the floor for a few questions, but thank you once again. So are there any questions from the audience coming from the presentation? Don't be shy and not all at once.
No, but I think I want to add something to, is this on? Can you hear me? I think I want to add something as we kind of got your minds going there. 2 considerations that we didn't mention. So if you thought about it, great, but if not, there was tax risk there as well. Company is incorporated in the Bahamas. They live in St. Martin. Is St. Martin a reportable jurisdiction for us? Will these assets be reported to, under CRS? So there's tax risk as well. And then the other is, as far as transaction monitoring is concerned, the husband sold his share ownership or whatever in the company. He decides to give the money to the wife. She's now holding these assets in her name. We need to make sure that she may not be just holding or fronting for him. So transaction monitoring, I would increase transaction monitoring on that account to ensure that there aren't any transactions linked to him to make it seem as though he's only parking those assets out of his name into her name. And she's using the account for his purpose or for his benefit. So I just want to add that in terms of, getting you thinking when you're assessing risks.
Yes, thank you for that, Maria. Of course, in the age of tax compliance, that really is one of the foremost considerations as compliance officers that you have in onboarding a relationship. And not just, I think what's important is the risks that both Maria and Fareda have highlighted are not only at the onboarding of the relationship, but subject to the continuous monitoring throughout the life of the relationship. So thank you both very much for those insights. Please join me in giving them a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course, we have a little something. So Maria, thank you so very much on behalf of the Association of International Banks and Trust Companies.